Now today we're going to have a look at Nicodemus, the man in John chapter 3 that came to Jesus by night, who didn't know the way of salvation. But Nicodemus is actually mentioned 2 more times in the book of John, and if the only thing we know about Nicodemus is from John chapter 3, that he was a fearful man and a coward who came at night time, well, it's a sad end to Nicodemus' life. But thankfully we read about him in John chapter 7, which we're going to read today, and John chapter 19, and he comes out as a follower of Jesus Christ into the public. What a wonderful story this is. So in John chapter 7 and the verse number 50, it says, Nicodemus saith unto them, he that came to Jesus by night, being one of them, doth our law judge any man before it hear him, and know what he doeth? They answered and said unto him, Art thou also of Galilee? Search and look, for out of Galilee ariseth no prophet. And every man went unto his own house. Now I've noted down 3 things, just 3 small points in this here story, the second part of it, of Nicodemus. The first one is Nicodemus's reply. You see, the men were looking to kill Jesus. The religious leaders wanted to kill Jesus. They didn't believe he was the Messiah. But yet, here's Nicodemus, and he takes a stand for Jesus. And he says in verse 51, Doth our law judge any man before it hear him, and know what he doeth? Now, these are the religious leaders who are all talking about the law. These people that don't know the law are cursed, but yet they were the ones that knew the law. But now Nicodemus pins them down and he says, hang on a minute, does our law not say that we should let a man have a hearing before we actually condemn him? And he was quite right. That was what the law of God said. Now let's take a step back and actually look at Nicodemus. This is Nicodemus, the man who's afraid to come to Jesus because he's afraid of who would see him. So he came at night time. But now, in the midst of all the religious leaders, the authority of the country, all his peers, men who are ready to kill Jesus, and now Nicodemus takes a step out and he takes a stand for God. What a wonderful thing that is. The fact that he had the courage to do this. Even though he was timid at the start, he gained the courage. One man who wrote on this here passage, he said the following, I thought this was quite good, that though at first he came to Jesus by night, for fear of being known, and still continued in his post, yet when there was occasion he boldly appeared in defence of Christ, and opposed the whole council that were set against him. Thus many believers, who at first were timorous and ready to flee at the shaking of a leaf, have at length, by divine grace, grown courageous and able to laugh at the shaking of a spear. What a transformation by the grace and the power of God, that Nicodemus, a timid man, was able to stand up for Christ. And so we are the same. We can get this strength from God. The second thing we have here is the ridicule by the Pharisees. Nicodemus replied and took a stand for Jesus, but now we have the ridicule of the Pharisees. And it says in verse 52, They answered and said unto him, Art thou also of Galilee? Search and look, for out of Galilee ariseth no prophet. Because they couldn't take Nicodemus on at his argument, the first thing they went to was ridicule. They said, Art thou of Galilee also? Well, he wasn't from Galilee, but what they were saying was, you're just like him. Are you one of his followers? Are you a friend? They ridiculed Nicodemus for taking this stand for Jesus. But not only do we have the ridicule, but we have the result. The final result of what happened from Nicodemus taking a stand, and it tells us in verse number 53, And every man went unto his own house. The result of this stand that Nicodemus took was that every man went to his own house. Well, what does that mean? Well, they gathered together to have a council to put Christ to death. But when Nicodemus took a stand for Christ, well, they saw that their plans couldn't be fulfilled at this time. So they scattered and every man went to his own house. We see the result of the stand Nicodemus took. So there are 3 small points that I had that I thought would be useful for us. This passage is good to read, but what does it mean for us? Number 1, the encouragement that we can be strong for God. This was a man who was feeble, weak, afraid, but yet by the grace of God, God made him strong and able to stand up against his enemies. And we're the same. Perhaps you're quite shy, timid. Well, pray to God and ask him for help and strength, and he will give you the strength and enable you to be able to say a word for him. Number 2, we may be ridiculed. The fact is that sometimes if we take a stand for Christ, people may laugh and scorn and mock, but trust in God and he'll look after us. And these people who ridicule us, well, God will deal with them in his own time, but he'll bless us for taking that stand. And number 3, the result that occurs of us taking a stand or saying a word for Christ. You see, here, the plans were frustrated of God's enemies, and so it's the same for us. If we take a stand, we don't know what way God will use that word, but he will use it, and he'll use it for his glory and for his honour. So let's have this encouragement today, and let us learn from Nicodemus not to be timid and afraid, but let's take a stand for Christ, speak up for him, and God will use it for his glory.